I mean, all of the things we're talking with this are actually will lead to better service in the restaurant, higher quality service with less labor. Labor's like the number one expense in a restaurant. I mean, sometimes I think it can be food and liquor combined, but post-pandemic, when labor costs have gone up so much, you really see. I think the number one expense in most social clubs is labor.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And so the reason why Lance is a guest today and not just the co-host is because he has opened some 20 or 30 so restaurants locally around the country, and most recently has been opening at some social clubs. So
yeah.
he's very intimate in how this works and what it looks like when it does not work. So we'll have to see how much time we have. Hopefully we can get this all into one video, but if not, we can pair this off and have a couple. But we're looking at covering implementing effective scheduling systems, cross-training employees, monitoring and controlling the labor costs, setting up clear performance metrics, and optimizing onboarding and training. So Lance, I'd say we just kind of jump right into this.
Yeah, let's just start with the number one thing you can do to control labor is to track it, right? So many restaurants are like, boy, my labor's too high, and you go in as a advisor or something, and you go, well, what do you mean it's too high? Like, what do you want it to be? Oh, I don't know, lower. Right. And I've said this many times. It's kind of like there's two things in this world I know for a fact, and one is more is not a plan, and lower is not a plan. So if you're running higher labor than you want, you need to put a specific number to what you're trying to run, and then you need to track your labor to that goal. Now, I would say if you're using any kind of time clock or point of sale system, there should be timekeeping in there. And if you're not using that, I will tell you right away that just the time savings, the timekeeping savings you will realize by tracking your labor and managing it to really just be the most impactful to your business will be well worth the cost. You'll actually make more money by buying a point of sale system that has some expense to it just in the labor savings. And I'll just give you an example. On any modern point of sale, any manager or club committee member or board member can walk up to a terminal at any time and go, what is my labor as a percent of my sales right up to this minute? And that can be really key. It's like the main tool to knowing how to run your restaurant is you got to know, you got to know the information. You got to have managers that can make good decisions, and they have to know the information. And if they're not using software to just this is like the basic, it's like the first grade of this is track your labor, measure it, hold managers accountable to setting a goal. So you got to have a labor budget.
Right.
Number two in there would be kind of the use scheduling software, right? So, and again, most modern point of sale, certainly in one POS that I work with, there's in there a scheduler tool where it's great because I can say, okay, I want a bartender and 2 servers and a host, 3 people in the kitchen. And I can put in there a budget for what I know my sales should be. I'm going to do $2,000 today. And it will say, you just scheduled labor that it is in excess of what you budgeted.
Okay.
So then I can go in and change my, I can go, well, shoot, I got to have that person come in an hour later. And the reality is the labor expectation for every day cannot be the same. I mean, you're always going to run higher labor on slow days and lower labor on busier days. I will say, James, it's not always evident, but the second kind of mistake people make is they go, well, I've just decided to cut my labor, so I'm just using less. That isn't the answer. The answer is the right labor to maximize sales and revenue, and having that at the right, that's really how you run it. It's efficient labor. It's not low labor. It's like the most efficient labor to generate revenue.
So let me ask you this, because I think that this is probably, especially for social clubs that are oftentimes very much volunteer run, but certainly volunteer, from an oversight standpoint, there's probably the question, okay, well, how complicated is it to implement this software? How complicated is it to understand how to use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's anything. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but I would say that you can't afford not to do it. I mean, we know, where it used to be you were paying a cook $10 an hour and you thought that was offensive, and now it's 20. The labor has gone up so much that you don't really have a choice but to manage that labor effectively. And those software tools are not overly complicated. I mean, they know who their audience is. They're not trying to make something that you have to, do a lot of training. But I'll say any modern point of sale system is going to do all that really easily. I know One POS does. I know, we've used that in a lot of clubs, and it's, is specifically for the reasons it's fairly simple to use. You can do this tracking. I'll tell you another cool thing when you start using scheduler programs is, imagine the board member. I wonder who the manager is tonight because my baked potato was terrible. And, you could
Right.
just look on the app and be, hey, Dave was managing and he's clearly not managing as well as he should be. So, there's that. I'll tell you another thing that, though, it's time clock is the obvious one. The other thing is there's a couple of other things that really affect training. One is cross-training employees.
Sure.
I mean, it's obvious in a kitchen, that like you got a fry cook and a broil cook. And I know most social clubs are pretty small where one cook does both of those, but really formally training them so you go, when we start slowing down, I can get rid of the cooks, the 3 cooks I had, one for each station, and go to 1 or 2 cooks that now can cross over. And if you get a little wave of business in and they're cross-trained well, they can just take care of that. That's I think that's an obvious one. Something else that people don't realize, especially if you're paying server minimum wage in a state that has that, Pennsylvania does.
Sure.
The cost of one host is probably the same hourly labor cost as 3 servers. So
Right.
would I rather run with 2 extra servers and no host? Yeah, I probably would. Now that's, again, you got to cross train them and you got to set an expectation that, hey guys, when you're not serving a table or when a customer walks into the door, you got to go right to the host stand and seat them and do all that. I mean, you need a little more process and procedure, but for sure, cross-training employees is another way to save some labor and get it right.
Sure. Under the third note, because I think cross-training employees is kind of straightforward. And I want to just, previously we were talking about software. I'll leave a link in the video where you can head over to our website, socialclubpro.com, and I'll make sure that we have a page set up for One POS. We can learn a little bit more about some of the scheduling and all of that.
Right.
Because I think people might want to read into that. But moving on into monitoring and controlling labor costs.
So, it's the same kind of, I think we were talking about it, if you don't track it, then you don't change it, right? You want
Right.
to collect all the information to make good decisions. So you should have a budget that says we want on a Tuesday, we want to run 15% of sales in the kitchen and we want to run 10% of sales in the front of the house. And then, say on a Friday, it's going to be significantly less, but it doesn't particularly matter. There's no magic number that says this restaurant should run 28% hourly labor and this one shouldn't run 30 and that one should run 20. I mean, it is kind of, in the restaurant business, it's always just, how can we do better? So if you put that together and you go, hey, let's track it for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to put out a budget that says, let's try and schedule differently and save, 10% and still deliver great service. I mean, all of the things we're talking with this are actually will lead to better service in the restaurant, higher quality service with less labor. Monitoring it is key. You should be able to print out a weekly report that shows what your labor is. I mean, again, I've seen clubs where they don't specifically go, our labor was 26%, it should have been 24. They go, oh, our labor was too high.
Right.
And that
Right.
doesn't mean
Not a
anything.
plan.
You've got to do it. And by the way, 2%, if you do, let's just say you're doing a solid business, you do 100,000 a month, 2% is $2,000.
Right.
So that kind of leads into I'm kind of bleeding a couple of points together. One is you have to measure. The other one is you have to set clear performance metrics, right?
Sure.
You've got to say, what is the standard of performance? And you want to hold your management team accountable to that. And I think there's some clubs that go, well, yeah, but we just run really low labor and we're not very busy. I would say sometimes you're not very busy because you run really low labor.
Sure. Yeah, it can go. It's a
Yeah.
double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I
Yeah.
get that. All right. So here's a question, and this one I know is kind of like a little sensitive question.
Yeah.
But so nepotism. I know that a lot of clubs, like you want to
Oh, yeah.
you want to hire your kid, you
Yeah,
want to
my
hire
cousin
your
works
friend,
there.
my cousin
Yeah,
works,
get it.
and that can be really effective, right? Because
Can.
sometimes you can't find anybody who's that dedicated than somebody that you know and is kind of in this with you. But
Yeah.
at the same time, that
Business
can-
is business.
Business
Right.
is
Yeah, I mean,
business.
you have to go. I hear that. Well, I got to protect the hours of the staff. And again, I've made this comment, especially when times are tight. It's, well, we can either cut that person's hours or we can, kind of close the club, right?
Right.
I don't mean to be dramatic about those decisions, but it's kind of run a good business. And the people that respect you understand that you're a good business and you're trying to run it for the benefit of the community. And the coolest thing about social clubs is they're benefiting the community. So
Right.
I think that's just an absolute key thing. So I'm going to add one last thing, and then I know we're tight on time. We said we were only going to do a shorter video. So, for sure, how you onboard new staff matters. right?
Right.
Too often they're like, oh, we're just going to have them start taking some tables. Not your best idea, right? It's got put them through formal training, budget that labor for training. That is a
Right.
cost of doing business. And when somebody goes, oh, I don't really budget for that because we don't do that formal of a training, I'm telling you, it's costing you money. You should budget formal training, and then you should follow that budget. And when somebody comes on, take them through
Sure,
that.
sure. I mean, it's not even just that they're going to be more effective, better understand what they're doing. More people are going to come in because they like the service. But I mean, think about the upselling, the cross-selling, the gambling selling, all of that you have an opportunity to make sure they're rock stars when they come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, I'm going to say with more modern point of sale systems, and I keep saying one POS, but they have an integrated learning management system.
Yeah,
so
that's
when you
awesome.
hire a new staff, you're not counting on the person that was trained 3 generations ago in how to use the point of sale. You have a new staff member, they're going on, and including managers, by the way, they're going online, they're going through some fairly, rigorous training that they can do on their phone, though. It's like
Right.
they don't need
Yeah.
to schedule 10 hours and be in a room, but, they can really get some quality training and get up to speed very quickly with the point of sale. And that again saves labor. Good training doesn't cost, when somebody goes, oh, well, you train somebody for 10 hours. And I've seen inexperienced people go, oh my gosh, that was a lot of money. I'm like, oh no, that was nothing compared to
Right.
what a bad server costs you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
It's
for
like
sure.
how that goes. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, listen, that's all the time that we have for today. But thank you for coming on, Lance. And I know you're going to be on a lot more as generally a co-host as opposed to a guest.
Yeah.
We'll be posting this on all of our socials. But if you guys have any questions or would like to reach out to Lance or myself to talk about one POS or other point of sales, maybe one that you're working with now, point of sale systems, and how you might be able to better utilize the software, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.